Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I'd like to do a video about commercial real estate in Europe. So there was an interesting court ruling that I thought I would discuss with you all regarding commercial real estate in Europe and how much a place is worth during a pandemic. So a few months back I did this video, UK commercial landlords already suing tenants. And in that video I made the very controversial statement that pissed a lot of people off, which is that when you rent a commercial space, you're not just renting the space, you're not just renting the building, you're renting that place's ability to bring you business and allow you to make money. Allow me to explain. If you have an apartment or you have a storage space, you may be paying, I don't know, anywhere from $1 to let's say 10 or maybe $15 per square foot. But when you have a store or some sort of commercial office space, you may be paying upwards of $40 to $300 a square foot. The reason that you pay so much more money for the office space or for the store is because that space has the ability to bring you business. You wouldn't be paying $300 a square foot for a storage space. That's ridiculous because the storage space is not going to bring you money. You're paying that amount of money for the space's ability to bring you money. And if you followed me through any of my real estate videos where I'm walking through places and looking at them with real estate brokers and salespeople, where they're trying to sell me on this space based on its ability to bring me money, based on the fact that it's right next to a school or it's right next to a bunch of office buildings where high-paid people work, or it's right next to a major subway line where I'm going to get tons of business. They advertise the space to me based on that space's ability to bring me revenue. However, you must understand that that is a double-edged sword. So if you're going to advertise a place that's the size of a garage being worth $20,000 a month when it looks like a 100-year-old unrenovated shithole, then you have to understand that that double-edged sword is then going to get you if there is a pandemic. Meaning that if I no longer have the ability to bring in customers to that space because the business is no longer legally allowed to open in that space, the law says that I cannot legally use this as a restaurant, then I'm not going to, no, you don't get to say, oh, what you're actually paying for is the space. You're not paying for the ability to make money. Ignore all the crap that we actually sell it to you based on. You need to pay us full price because what you are paying for is the room itself. Because of course you would pay $20,000 or $30,000 a month for a room even if it didn't have the ability to make you money, right? And a lot of people were calling me a communist. There's some evil person when I brought up this basic fact that when you're renting a space for $20,000 or $40,000 or $60,000 a month, you're not renting a storage facility. You're not renting the space. The only reason that you would rent that space is that space's ability to make you money. And apparently there is a court ruling in Australia. Seems like did I say Australia? I meant Europe. I can't tell them apart sometimes, to be honest. More koalas in Australia. But anyway, this here says, operator of shop closed for corona, refuses to pay rent, and judge agrees today at 4 p.m. A remarkable verdict in the Brussels district of Ederbeek, my apologies for mispronouncing it. The owner of a shop that is temporarily closed due to the corona measures has proven right in refusing to pay his rent. Many non-essential retailers have already seen a large amount of black snow this year. They had to close their business during the first lockdown, and now again during the second, while the rental costs of the buildings continue to run. The operator of a D-store in Ederbeek, a chain that sells personal care products, therefore decided not to pay his rent during the first lockdown. The owner of the property went to justice, I imagine that is Google Translate for court, and to everyone's surprise, the tenant was proven right. To whose surprise? To whose surprise? I brought this up in April. Nobody is paying $30,000 a month for a room that they cannot bring customers to. The difference between a space that is the size of a garage being $900 a month if you're renting it to live in and $30,000 a month in a commercial district, you're paying that 20 or 30 times more for the ability to make money. Now, it continues on and says, the justice of the peace in Ederbeek has reminded everyone that it is the owner's obligation to make his premises available in accordance with the tenant's commercial purpose, says Lionel Everin, the store's lawyer at RTBF. But the measures of the government released a landlord from this obligation, and the tenant from his obligation to pay. In other words, the owner cannot rent out a property in which the tenant can sell, so he does not have to pay rent. That area seems, I think that Google Translate kind of screwed that up a little bit because that specific last sentence doesn't make as much sense to me. Now, to be clear, because I know people are screaming communist, I can hear you. I can hear you. I'm not a communist. Is that it's not the landlord's responsibility to have a space that makes you money. And to some extent, I agree. So, for instance, let's say that I'm a VCR salesman in 2020, and I have a store in Midtown Manhattan. I rent that store in Midtown Manhattan to sell VCRs, and I get no business. Do I have the right to tell my landlord, look, I can't pay you. Nobody's buying VCRs here. Your space is bad. No, obviously not, because that's ridiculous. Nobody is buying a VCR in 2020. Maybe for, I don't know, for lulz or for retro purposes or for, memory, maybe like one VCR sale a month, if even. But like, you're not going to sell enough VCRs to pay your staff or rent in Manhattan. That's never going to happen. Or if I were, let's say, there was this one gentleman that had the old store that I had at 186 First Avenue. He was a linoleum salesperson, I imagine, from what I see from the store. And I remember hearing some grumbling from the neighbors where they said, they're trying to kick me out. This person's trying to steal my store. They're stealing my store. And it's not about theft. It's simply, I saw an ad for the store. I showed up. I told the owner of it, okay, I can rent it. And there's more demand for MacBook repair in the East Village of New York than there is for linoleum. If you're selling telegraph repair services in 2020, it's not the landlord's fault if you're not able to pay rent. That obviously we would factor that excuse in as ridiculous. However, on the other extreme, if you're selling a space for $20 or $30 or $40 or $50,000 a month solely based on the fact that you can use it for business, and you are not legally allowed to open that business, it would be insanity to charge an amount of money for that space or to claim that that space is now valuable more than the value of a storage space. The maximum value of a space that you cannot open for business, that you're not allowed to live in according to the terms of the lease, is whatever that going rate would have been for a storage facility in that area. Because if you have a store that you cannot legally open because of the coronavirus restrictions, that you cannot legally live in because the terms of most commercial leases prohibit you from living in the space, you now have a storage facility, which is worth the amount of rent that a storage facility is worth, in my opinion. Now, we also have a lot of gray area here, which is going to be much more difficult to address via courts. So, for instance, let's say you have a space like mine. I am legally allowed to stay open. We are considered essential, so we are allowed to stay open. However, the space's expense is considerable. $12,500 a month will go up next year. This space was worth about that amount of money because we were right next to FIT. That's closed. Because we were right next to thousands and thousands and thousands of office buildings in a business district where people's salaries in these office buildings are often very high. All of those offices are closed. Is this space now worth $12,500? It's not worth zero. I'm allowed to open. It's not worth zero. I can do business out of it. It's not worth $12,500 either. The issue there is that I'm allowed to open. However, the businesses that would constitute my customers, that are the reason that I am doing business here versus anywhere else, are not open. So what is the space worth at that point? Because to me, $12,500 for a space that, again, my primary customer bases all around me are closed, it's not worth that. However, it's also not worth zero. This is something that's going to be very difficult to work out in courts. It's going to be very difficult to work out, dealing with your landlord. It's going to be and I think a lot of businesses are going to be in that place where they have a space and they are technically allowed to open. However, all of the people that would constitute their customers are closed. So what do you do at that point? And the thing is, I'm honestly surprised that this managed to make its way to court. I know in New York, typically this is usually backed up for 12 to 16 months when there is no pandemic. I cannot imagine the moment the moratorium on evictions is lifted, what's going to happen. I can imagine a line out the door for the next 3 to 5 years in court in New York City. The edge cases are going to be the ones that are obviously much more difficult. There's going to be some subjectivity that is weighed into there. This also opens up another can of worms, which is if the government rendered this space worthless by having these lockdowns to the tenants, then what do you do for the property owner? Because, again, I understand why the tenant would not want to pay the rent, and I completely understand why the tenant is not paying the rent. But then what do you do with the property owner? And further, if we are going to talk about compensating property owners, then how do we address the fact that this market, at least in some countries like the United States, is insanely inflated as it is? So for instance, let's say we were to say that tenants were not paying property owners the full value because of the pandemic, and you want to compensate them for the fact that they're not being paid by their tenants, then how do you deal with that within the context that you have spaces in New York City that have not rented for over 8 years because they're asking an amount that's way over what anybody would want to pay? So if you say, listen, I'm not getting any rent for my space, the pandemic, you kind of have to find out a way to separate the spaces that were actually getting paid for the last 8 years because they came up with reasonable arrangements with tenants to spaces that were purposely keeping their prices inflated so that they could pretend that the building is worth more than it is. Because if we're going to talk about the government issuing aid, which may be a fair thing to discuss given that the government is disallowing these spaces to be utilized for their intended purposes, then we need to, I think, make a distinction between spaces that were offered at prices that were somewhere remotely close to reasonable pre-pandemic and places that have been vacant for the past 8 or 9 years because they have stubborn landlords that want to pretend that their property is worth more than it actually is. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Also, before closing out the video, I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody who has helped contribute to wiki2.rossmangroup.com. I'll leave a link down below. Right to repair is not simply about legislation. It's about making available information that's going to allow normal, everyday people to open repair shops, but also be able to fix their own stuff. Right to repair is not simply about legislation. It's also about making repair available to as many people as possible by providing them with the knowledge and the tools that they need. And that's something that I've been committed to doing for a long time and something that I'm trying to do in a more structured format. It's something that I asked for the help of my audience with because I will need the help of my audience to make this project possible, and you have all been helping me in many ways. One of them is by adding to the wiki. So we have over here a list of my videos, and what we're doing is we're trying to get people to go through every single one of my videos that's in this list over here and then add what was wrong with it to the wiki. So essentially you have, here is your symptom, here is your solution. I have been adding to it as I'm able to make time. I'm training some new people at the business, and I'm just kind of working to work through my own queue and backlog here, and I'm trying to do this in my spare time. But you can see here that I am trying to add as much stuff to this as I can from my own videos and from my own head. My goal is to make it as simple and as quick as possible to take all that information that's available in hundreds and hundreds of videos and make it available in these nice little flashcard-like format where it's much simpler for you to figure out what the common problems and solutions are. And I would be humbled and honored if you would help me to continue with this by going through these lists with me. So here, admittedly, this list is kind of incomplete. Someone used a tool, I'm not sure what it is, they had it in Discord, to make this list. But I noticed that I actually had a bunch of videos in my component level board repairs playlist, which you could find on YouTube. A bunch of my videos for board repair were not actually in that playlist because I forgot to put them in there over the years as I was adding them. So I just re-added them. So there's probably another 40 or 50 videos that are not even on this list yet. However, there are also a bunch of videos on this list that have not been added to the wiki, that could be added to the wiki. And again, my goal is to add as much information to this as possible so that someone who's just starting out can fast forward and get to where I was without going through a lot of the hell and trouble of figuring out everything on their own. And also my hopes with it is that people who are in the industry can also add to this, add their own pages with other devices with solutions that have been confirmed so that maybe all of us may learn something from some of you. And I have a bunch more stuff to add to this, just my visual inspection page by itself. I really do want people to be able to tell what corrosion under a BGA chip is going to look like, even if it's like really difficult to kind of get there. I want people to be able to tell when a probe point is bad, what probe points matter, what probe points don't matter, how to tell in something like this when you have a little resistor that looks good from far away, but I want to train you to be able to tell that that is bad without even using a microscope, so that when you see that, you know what that means. When you see this solder ball, you know what that means. When you see a cap that has this little shade on the side of it, you know what that means. When you see those red vias, you know what they mean. And so, look at a QFN from the side rather than just from the top. I want to take all these little tips and tricks and tidbits and put it into an easily digestible guide so that as many people as possible can get started in this industry, as many people as possible can work on their own stuff, and that all of this information can be made available for free to anyone without, again, no memberships and not having to pay to access it. I spoke a few months ago about the idea of creating a nonprofit for people involved within right to repair and the repair industry that would both promote right to repair so that more normal people understand it, and also make it easier for people to get into this industry. I wanted to create something that provides value to people that are fixing these products, or people who just want right to repair to be an issue that more people in the mainstream understand. And I am in the process of creating this organization, which will hopefully be funded by an outside donor. That is moving along at the speed of government at the moment. It's going to take a while. But this is something where I want to really start getting the framework of it put together, on my own time and on my own dime before I actually have resources. So once resources actually show up, then I can really hit the ground running and make this into something that's amazing, rather than just this little bare bones thing here. But I've got my own staff contributing on their time to this at the moment. I've told people here, anytime there's something that you think that should be in there that is not there, anytime you finish a repair, if it's not just some basic little corrosion here thing, anytime you see a mistake, anytime you see something that you think someone else wouldn't notice as a beginner, let me know, and also put time into contributing into the wiki. So they have been putting a lot in here. However, none of us, unfortunately, have time to go through 500 of my old videos and add them. And I think if even one viewer were to watch one board repair video and then make one entry into the wiki, we could probably have this entire list done in literally a day. And this would be a much more amazing guide. I fully intend, if I am able to actually open up a nonprofit for this, to actually be able to put resources into creating guides like this so that more people can enter the repair industry, more people can understand how to fix their own devices with information that's easily indexable, that wasn't previously indexed anywhere besides, the corner of some random Facebook forum or Discord or in the minds of an employee at one store. I want this stuff to be centrally available so that as many people as possible can get involved. Right to repair is not just about legislation. It's not just about, a right to repair bill being passed. Right to repair is also about the responsibility of those who know what they're doing to make accurate information available to those who want it. Every right comes with a responsibility. And I think that the responsibility that we have, if we are leaders in the industry, or if we're good at what we do, is to make that information available so that the next person can follow in our footsteps and get where we are without having to go through all of the hell of figuring it out piece by piece on their own. And you never know. Maybe those people who get involved in the industry after reading this and getting involved will figure out tomorrow's problems and be able to contribute here so that we can learn from them. Thank you for helping. Thank you for contributing. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.